Okay. All right. So peace, family. Welcome. Welcome to the Pro Black Perspective on KWAZ Radio. Today we have a special program. It's an open discussion, so anybody could join on Yurugu Chapter 1. And today I have three esteemed guests, and if they can, I'd like for them to introduce themselves so that everybody can, like everybody listening can feel like, I want to hear from these people, So anybody could introduce themselves.
Okay, I'll go first. Okay, I'm Kokumusa, and basically I'm Pan-Africanist first, black first, of course. I'm involved with some local organization in France, and basically, what can I say else? Basically, I'm all Team Africans, basically.
Right.
Yes, and originally I'm from France, and specifically from French Guyana, a little colony, neo-colony that still exists in South America.
Let me ask you this: what's your handle? How can people contact you, or how can people read what you got?
I'm on Twitter and turbulent_le, like LE, turbulent_le, LE.
All right. Okay.
Like le turbulent. Yes.
All right. So, all right, Cicely, you can speak next, I guess.
It's okay.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
I'm Cicely McLean. I have, long time Pan-African organizer with organizations you might know, including the All African People's Revolutionary Party. I recently, a few years ago, relocated to Accra, Ghana, from Chicago in the U.S. And you can reach me on Twitter, or the usual channels, social media, Yurugu McLennan, or either New African Image Makers.
Okay. All right. And last but not least.
And for me, I'm Mwele Thai from Zimbabwe originally, but now in South Africa. I'm a Pan-Africanist, and I do a community work here in South Africa, organizing the community that I'm living in terms of educating the kids about Pan-African stuff.
Oh, that's sweet. All right. And how can we reach you?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. It's Thai. Twitter is Thai, or via email evans.dube85@gmail.
Okay. All right. And of course, I'll let you guys know I'm Oni. If you don't know, I wrote books, and you could contact me on Twitter as well at Onitaset. That's it. All right. So we're gonna start off. Actually, before we even jump into like questions, I want to formulate. We have questions, answers, replies, so on and so forth. But first, since we're talking about Yurugu Chapter 1, can anybody like tell us your experience with it and what you think about the books? What do you think about the book? Would you recommend it? Why do you recommend it? And all that sort of stuff. And feel free to talk freely,
I would like to chime in right here because I have been familiar with the Yurugu text, but I've been in and out of the book, never sitting down for a study group or any other reason, just reading the book straight through. As I have begun, reading with you guys, I noticed a few things that, I just like to point out for fun, okay? Mm-hmm. I know the author, and I've had a chance to sit in and listen to her, interview her. But I also know several of the people who've been mentioned in the first chapter, in the introduction and the acknowledgments, and I've worked with many of them. So I just feel like I've come into the understanding of Yurugu and what Dr. Ani is explaining to us in this book from a roundabout way, meaning I understand her very clearly from the sources that she named, and also from the way she's putting one and two together in Yurugu. So I hope you guys understand that. But she mentions a lot of people from Hunter Adams to who's also one of my teachers. I don't know, several people that she mentioned in the acknowledgments that I've had a chance to work with in some capacity and that I know personally. So that's just one of those moments, that as a young organizer, you hear people, the elders, with their personal firsthand experiences with some of the events and people mentioned in these texts. And I guess I'm I'm barely moving into the middle age status. So I'm starting to see those experiences as well. So the text is like literally alive for me right now.
Well, we appreciate that. And anyone else? We appreciate that you had that exposure and that experience, and you're sharing it with us. So thank you so much. Anybody else have anything to add?
Yeah. Yurugu is a must read for everyone because coming from a colonized country, right to this day, like South Africa, I think like a European right now. So for me to understand how it came up to be and how I can reverse that, I need guidance, and Yurugu is one of those texts that can guide me well in understanding the mindset that I have become accustomed to, the European mindset, which is a Mahafa mindset to myself and my society. So it's a must.
All right. Anyone else?
For myself, actually, I've been also acquainted to the books like throughout the years, like never really read it entirely, but read some chapters, and of course I read the chapter for today, and I must say that also it's a must read book, and it's funny enough, it's like, for me it's a tale of culture. Like she really says the stuff. Sorry, is there a problem?
No, I think he just didn't mute, but it's fine.
Okay. So can I go? Oh.
No, I think he's just unaware that he's still being recorded. Maybe he has a phone conversation going on.
Okay, no problem. So basically, yeah, and I can see also the some stuff she mentioned in the book. Like I can see it clearly playing out in reality, because like I have many lived experience that totally reflects the books, and also I can say that what she's saying throughout the books is basically what I've heard my mom says, my grandma say, and basically it's really what she tells it is, it's a African centered critique of European culture. So that's it.
Yeah, I actually do want to add too that it's so good, it's so refreshing to see her express European culture and break it down in this way, in the sense that you begin to see how deeply ingrained European culture is in our conversations as is. Because even yesterday, for instance, I had this this conversation came up about, I guess, women being submissive to men, and you realize that that parallels her discussions in the book about submission, domination, and inferiors and superiors, and so on and so forth. So it's just interesting that while we have this conversation, you know, it's really a conversation that was put into us by this Wazungu culture, but we don't see it as that. And you know, if you look at how the conversations played out, we're talking from a lot of people were talking from a perspective of, oh, this is who I am, but it was really the fact that we adopted European, as she would put it, epistemology that really, you know, solidified that really kind of shows how deeply ingrained this colonization process is.
Yes.
But anyway, so
yes, and I can also testify in the sense that I feel maybe also I'm expressing something that is really purely only my individual lived experience, but being in the Caribbean basically, and being from a country that was not really, the situation is like difficult to describe, because like me myself, I feel I've been raised since with ancient values. So basically we grew up, me and my cousins, I grew up with my parents, both of my parents, of course, but with my cousin, we were always at grandma's place, and I always felt that grandma was like the home of the family. So you see, it's like, for me, it's reflecting this matrilineal system. And so there we had like conversation, like, for instance, one thing the French do is how they rob from you, actually. So they will come, they will say, you must stop practicing your ancient ways, and then like 10 years, 15 years down the road, they will come with this rationalized process, and they will say to you, oh yes, we know, we said to you like 15 years ago. Yes.
No, I think he just doesn't mute his. Well, I mean.
Yeah, still.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I should mute him or not, because I don't want to. I don't know if he knows how to mute himself, but it's all good. You can keep talking though.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, they will tell you like, oh, just forget about what you are doing. Do this new scientific way. It's better. It's safer and it's like more clean. It's more advanced. It's modern. Blah blah blah. And 15 years after, they come and say, we found like some new ways, and actually you realize it's what you were already doing like 15 years ago, and they told you to just forget about it. So from my family perspective, I've seen this emotion, basically, like the way they rationalize stuff, and even the way they steal stuff from you. So basically they will push you out of your culture, rationalize, take the molecules or whatever from the plant you're using to heal yourself, and then they come and they sell it to you. So for me, this book is really telling. It's really something I've lived.
Yeah, it's refreshing. Yeah. All right. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to. Yeah, you were gonna say something?
I wanted to add about that the Europeans, when they think universally, whatever that they do. Right now, what they are doing with these vaccines, they want everyone to lock down the whole world. Their own reality must impose on everyone else. That's part of their thinking.
That's true.
It has to be universal, because they think themselves as a universal man, and then they also think themselves as modern men also.
Yeah, you're right, because if you even look into, because I know she contrasts, you know, Asia and Europe, and if you look into it, China's not trying to vaccine the whole world. You know, China's just doing for China, and China's looking out for China and at best. But you know,
Yeah.
the Western world is like, hey, you know, like Bill Gates, I guess, is going on some campaign to just get everybody, you know, just like just look for people to get. And he figures, you know, oh, these people are too primitive, they can't help themselves, they don't know how to save themselves, so on and so forth. But anyway, what I would advise for everybody is, well, I mean, I don't usually do this, but if you find that you are making noise when other people are talking, you could mute yourself and then unmute when you're ready to talk. But it's kind of hard to remember to unmute. That's the reason why I don't do it myself. But if you find that that you're talking over people, you can just mute yourself and you know, only unmute when you want to speak. But anyway, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to go over a few passages. The chapter is like 100 pages, so we can't really go through all of it. But there was a few that I really thought stood out for me, and I'm going to just read them, and I'll ask you guys a question, and maybe like put a few minutes on the clock, in order that we don't just, you know, spend the whole time on either one of them. So I'm going to try to read this one quickly, and then anybody who wants to, you know, expound on it can. All right. So this is page 41 of Yurugu, and I'm going to start off with the quote from, I guess, Havelock, which is, every logos, that is, every argument, every rationalization, every discourse should be subject to the same type of subordination and hierarchy, as well as organic connection as the body described at its moment of creation in the Timaeus. You know, so then remember, Ani explains. In other words, the structure of Platonic discourse itself forced those who used it to accept a particular concept of social order. Brilliant. In the very syntax of our speech as we learn the English language, the justification of our inferiority is embedded, and what is more, we accept that fact as we master the language. And it is not accidental, given the nature of European cultural history, that the word master, which designates the male gender, means to gain control over. Indeed, this analysis of Platonic thought is not merely an academic exercise. It helps to expose the oppressive and repressive forms within European and Euro-American cultures that shackle Africans, other non-Europeans, and to a lesser extent women. Why is it that speech in European-derived societies is the mark of status in the culture? And why is it that African people in America and the Caribbean have maintained such distinct language styles? Here we have the intuitive resistance to a change in consciousness. The creation of African-influenced languages in circumstances of oppression can be understood as a force that insists on the maintenance of an ancestral worldview. So I mean that was really, there was a lot of things going on in that paragraph, or those two paragraphs. What are you guys thoughts on that? And you know, when I say guys, I also mean Cicely, right? You know, just everybody collectively. Anyone have any thoughts on that one? You guys have to unmute.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, but that word master, again, the way they define words themselves, Europeans.
Yeah, I mean, back in, so my family's from Jamaica, and they were telling me that, like my mother was telling me that her father, like her father's name, like her father had some name, but before the name was Mas, and I didn't know that it was short for master. So apparently, like I always thought that was his name, like Mas, you know, like his name was Mas. But apparently the kids would call him, you know, master, and you know, and I thought it was a little weird. Like, why would you call why would you call somebody master? But even seeing her describe that master is actually just another way of saying Mister in a sense, or even just another way of just the fact that master has that definition and also has that connotation, and you know, the double meaning and all that. It's kind of interesting that master, like a lot, like you said, it's just loaded. It's just loaded that, you know, when we try to get the language, we master the language. We try to do something, we master, and it's just embedded into our language. Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry, I forgot to put the timer on.
Everything.
You said what?
I said everything is about control. For you
Everything.
to master something,
Mm-hmm.
you want to control it. You want it to be under you.
Exactly. And that's
That's what.
Yeah.
And you can go. You can continue.
No, let me say, and that's really what I thought was like really fascinating about this whole book, because I guess I did touch on to the thing earlier where we talk about, you know, submission and domination and the role of relationships, and you kind of see that it really does come from this Platonic discourse, as Murvahani is emphasizing throughout the book, that, you know, because Plato sets up this dualism, or because like we tend to always dichotomize things, and then we say, oh, one is better than the other, and on top of that, one must control the other, one must be master over the other. So we say, you know, the man is master over the woman, the day is master over the night, or whites are master over blacks. You know, it's just built into our language to, it's built into this language. Sorry, not our language, but it's built into this language, or Wazungu's culture in general, to subvert and suppress the other. And I thought that was a
Yes.
really fascinating thing. Yeah.
Yes, I very much agree with what she's saying, because, like, again, from experience, you can just justify it by your experience. What she's laying down right now is the fact that it's, for me, what another fact that I like about the book is that she came up with the concept of acidi, that is the seed, the original seed containing the DNA of the culture, basically. And it's a very remarkable concept that she came with, because, like, to call it a seed with DNA of culture, it tells you everything that you need to know. It tells you how it will form, how it will grow, what it will do, and all the logical consequences. And now she's speaking about the logos, but just before, I guess, like, she spoke also about the reification. So that is the process you do to objectify everything. And here is an example. So basically, she was saying, like, first, the Europeans, what they do is that they separate everything, like the dichotomy you were speaking about. Like, it must be at one end you have, like, the subject, so the thinking thing, and then you have the object, so basically lifeless, formless stuff that you can control. Again, we go back to this idea of controlling everything, and it's the same. And now at play we have the dichotomization and the hierarchization of stuff, because once you separate the subject from the object, then you can control the subject, can control the object. So the speech is better than she said, the speech is better than the writing form is better than the speech, because when you write stuff, you create an object and you can control it.
Exactly. That's true.
Lost and for the part that we resisted, and I guess it's our DNA to always come back to the spiritual and how to say, the fact that we Africanized the language is because we felt like this, because she in the book also is speaking a lot about intuition, the fact that it's not only about rationalization. You can you can have intuitions about, like, stuff, and then kind of guess your way through. And we guess our way through this system by creating some new language, because we needed it, since we are spiritual beings, conscious spiritual beings.
Yeah, that was a interesting part about it too. That the idea that, you know, like, you know, our Creole and our patois and so on and so forth, or our slang, you know, is part of us, you know, kind of resisting that sense of control and so forth. Let me ask you this though, since you are probably more familiar with French, do you see this same sort of analysis play through with the French language?
With the French language, not at all. Not at all. Because like it's different. Because like the French, if you want a good analogy, the French, they are different from the British because they are Latin people, so they are much more like, with feelings and stuff. English people are, very pragmatic, so they would say stuff in your face. If they don't like you, they tell it to your face. The French won't. They will tell you they will tell it when you're not there.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, the English had set up a different colonial style than the French. The French were about assimilation. So it was about how French you could transform yourself. So here in France, you have a sort of language ghetto language.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but you have also to realize that French is still having its colonies, like me. So basically, we have a Creole over there. So it's a totally different language. So it would be akin to patois in Jamaica, for instance. But on the continent in Europe, you don't have the same. It's much more like an Argotic language. You think?
Wait, were you saying something? Okay. All right. So.
I don't know.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So let's see. Really, academic exercise. I thought.
French. We didn't have.
We cannot hear you.
Is your phone cutting out, or your audio cutting out?
I'm not listening.
I can hear you. I can hear everybody that's talking. So.
What is he talking right now?
Who? Me?
No. Oh, I thought. Okay, never mind.
I guess it's the network. The network just get the network.
No, he was speaking. We cannot hear you properly. You're cutting off. The connection is bad.
Impossible. All right, let's So I mean, this is about 10 minutes. So let's go to the next one. We're gonna go to page. By the way, I'd advise if your audio messes up, just sign out and sign back in. Possibly that might be a solution. But let's say page 55 is and I'm gonna start off with Lubitz. This actually talks about the written word as we were discussing earlier. So I'm gonna just reset this timer, and then so she says on page 55, she says R.A. Schwaller de Lubitz characterizes the Medu Necher in the following way, distinguishing them from the merely literal mode, symbolism, which is a mode of expression. He distinguishes from the symbolic, which is an application of a state of the mind, or again, a mentality. Symbolism is technique. The symbolic is a form of writing of a vital philosophy. The symbol is a sign that one must learn to read, and the symbolic is a form of writing whose laws one must know. They have nothing in common with the grammatical construction of our languages. It is a question here, not of what might be called hieroglyphic language, but of the symbolic, which is not an ordinary form of writing. De Lubitz is concerned with describing the principles that govern the symbol and the symbolic in the expression of vital philosophy, not a rationalistic philosophy. He says that there exists no hieroglyphic language, but only a hieroglyphic writing, which uses the symbol to lead us toward the symbolic. The significance of these passages is that it affirms my belief that the Medu Necher of Kemet does not represent a primitive form of secular or profane script, and is not therefore pre-European. Rather, it represents a quite different view of reality, a mindset that sought to understand the universe as cosmos. Therefore, careful not to attempt the separation of spirit and matter. So that when we speak of the literate mode as championed by Plato, we mean to stress a unique definition and use that mode, one devoid of the symbolic and dilute sense, right? This writing lacks something. It was only able to deal with a one-dimensional reality. And as Diamond says, and I'll just continue a little bit, It reduced the complexities of experience to the written word. With the advent of writing, symbols became explicit. They lost a certain richness. Man's words were no longer endless exploration of reality, but a sign that could be used against him. Writing splits consciousness in two ways. It becomes more authoritative than talking, thus degrading the meaning of speech and eroding oral tradition, and it makes it possible to use words for the political manipulation and control of others. It was not that this literal mode represented or led to higher truths, but that the claim was made that it did, and that it gave the illusion of having done so, making this medium useful. It worked. It helped to control minds, values, and behavior. This is any media does, but in a new and for some a desirable way. The written language is more impressive than speech. Platonic epistemology achieved this once it was valued. Then speech came to imitate the writing, which was no longer magical, sacred, and truly symbolic. The permanence of the written word gave it ideological strength. Written dialogues, written laws, and strangely enough, written prayers, the sacred reduced to profane scriptures. All of this became evidence for the European of the superiority of his or her culture. Does anybody have anything to say about that one? Oh, Cicely, we haven't really heard much from you, so do you have anything to say about that one?
Not particularly. I think it's very plain and very simple. In the sense that how could I say this? I for some reason I relate things back to my experiences. I do that a lot because I observe my experiences as best I can and the people around me. And one thing that I'm constantly pointing out to people, especially which I have good friends in the we didn't come from Africa crowd. We were always in America crowd. And I always, remind them that, you have to go to the scene of the purported crime and do your investigations there. You can't sit here in Georgia or California or, Minnesota and investigate a crime scene on the African continent. You know what I mean? And one of the reasons that I give for that is that we have kept meticulous records. We haven't thought of them as meticulous records because, according to the European, the Sealy, oral traditions means absolutely nothing. But in practice, in real life, there are court cases in West Africa that go back 200, 300 years. And it may not all be based on written record. It's sometimes based on the cultural keeper of that particular group or those particular areas passing on oral traditions. But I usually use that as an example to try to jog us out of that little rut that we're in that says that, only primary source written materials, can be valued in any way.
No, that's true. That's true. I see Machiavelli joined us. Machiavelli, for those of you who don't know, is likely to be the moderator for the debate tomorrow. So, thanks, brother, for showing up. Anybody else have any comments on the? Anyone else have any comments on the passage I just read?
Sorry, I didn't get the passage because of the network problems here.
Oh, the network problem. Oh, okay. Oh, damn, I don't know what to do about that. But basically, it's the passage on how Medu Neter was more symbolic and represented a language that was connecting spirit and matter, whereas Wazungu has his use of the written word, as you were pointing out earlier, is more to separate spirit and matter. And as you were saying, it creates this object that we can, but it's also this object that white people then use to say that their culture is superior because they have extensive written records, whereas a lot of other cultures may not, for whatever reason.
Yeah. But the Europeans, their thought process is one-dimensional, it's linear also.
Mm-hmm.
So they break things down its simplest forms. As Africans, we use the written, we use the oral, and the spiritual also. We do not dwell on one aspect of recording or writing things down. We tend to do it multi ways. I guess themselves, because they break things down to small little pieces, they then emphasize the writing part more than any other. We have our writing scripts in Africa, ancient as well, but that's not the only way we do it.
Yeah. Anyone else have any comments? Oh, by the way, it's on page 55 to 56 if you want to check out what I was
okay.
what I was reading. But
yeah, I just wanted to add that yes, it's another example of how they everything they come across is just reductive. Like they reduce everything to the simplest form, stripping everything from its like value, from its substance, and after criticize it to later come and tell you stuff. They did this with the Egyptian Medunator, and then they come and tell you, oh, but you know, we have philosophy, so when you write a sentence, it can have like deeper and deeper meanings and blah blah blah. So it's the same process for me that is in play there. Like, and also it's also a proof for me that they are the new kid on the block, because if they don't objectify everything to a functional something they can sell, something they can like dominate, it's useless for them. Like, and there is a guy doing some research. Unfortunately, he's doing it in French, and it's very interesting what he does, because he goes with like African words like to describe the Medu nature. Like, for instance, he would say something like every time you see a piece of bread, it's because in all African language the bread is generally is associated generally with words of feminine words, like everything that is feminine is associated to bread and to everything that is sensual. And he goes like after this like to a like more philosophical stuff, and it's very interesting to listen to him.
Well, that's nice. If you get his name before the podcast ends, you know, please share.
His name, you can get his YouTube channel. It's like of course, a contrario, like in the Latin word a contrario, a contrario.
Oh, okay.
I will write it in the channel. Yeah, I will write it in the channel.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
All right. So what can I say about that? Oh yeah, I do like how Ani is, because Ani seems familiar with, you know, the thing that a lot of us saw, at least I did growing up, which is, you know, you'll see white people denouncing Africa and saying, oh, you guys don't have written languages and you guys don't, you know, blah blah, which is, you know, entirely untrue, of course, but it's just interesting that kind of complaint, that kind of guilting, that kind of, you know, that kind of mocking, if you will, right, comes from this, you know, this Wazungu Asili. And so, you know, it's like we, you know, what Ani does for us is that she knows, I guess she knows that we're going to encounter those white people who are going to try to put us down, or even, I guess we went through, well, I did go through this public fool system where they make it so that we feel like we kind of have this inferiority complex and we don't know why. And part of it is this whole like it's infusing us to say, oh, Africa doesn't have these written records, Africa doesn't have this language, so it's worse, it's inferior. But that really comes to play through this you know, this paradigm that they have. And if we can reject this paradigm, or when we reject this paradigm, we realize that we don't need to have like we don't, we don't have to fall into this, oh, this is inferior, this is superior, this is better, this is worse. And instead, we could just embrace who we are and what we have. And I think that's actually one of the things that I would say is like valuable here in this book. Anybody else have anything to say about that? No? Okay.
Well, I mean, we did have written language, though. We did.
Yeah, of course, of course.
In several different kingdoms and I don't want to say tribes, but in different groups. Like Igbo had Isimbiri, Isimbiri, the symbology that's written on cloth and blankets as well.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask a question related to this a little bit, and it's I don't know if it's a question or just something I'm interested to see if anybody has any feedback about it. Dr. Africa has was telling us about the differences between just different groups and how it affects their DNA and their physiological structure. And he told us in class one day that Europeans don't think, they process. That's what that's what he said. He said they don't think, they process. We think. And then I'll add to that a lecture I was listening to by Kalindi Ayi, who recently just reached the ancestral realm too. They both passed away within about a month of each other last year. But in Kalindi Ayi's theory, it has a lot to do with the development over time and through the ice ages, the Younger Dryas, the second Younger Dryas. And what he was putting forth is another scientific, biological, and physical explanation for the absence of what I would like to call higher thought, which is African thought. So I just wanted to put that out there because at the time that Dr. Ani wrote this book, maybe all of Kalindi's, input or Dr. Africa's input wasn't as readily available and discussed at that time. But just for me, I just feel like, man, that gives another level of perspective to what Dr. Ani is presenting. So I just want to throw that out there in case anybody is familiar with Dr. Africa's work or with Kalindi Ayi's work. And if you're not, maybe check it out, because I'm really interested in seeing how those theories stand next to Yurugu.
That's interesting. Anybody have any comments on that?
I would like to agree with the sister there about Europeans processing, not thinking. If you look at what Marimbani says about Plato, remembering that Plato learned everything that he learned in Kemet, was trying to process that information and using the European way. So I'm fully in agreement with the sister about them less thinking and more processing.
Yeah, Cicely, could you articulate the difference between thinking and processing for people who might not understand?
Yeah, that was my next question.
Yeah, that's a great question. It was that and another statement that I can't get correct. I'm gonna have to check in with some of my other some of my classmates from my studies with Dr. Africa, because I'm definitely gonna go into this a little bit more. But what he was saying is that your brain has a right and a left side. It does. But he said that there's connective fibers. I can't remember the name of them. Mm-hmm. But what that part of your brain does is relays information back and forth through from right to left and left to right. And what he was saying is that African people's connective our reaction, our timing, and just the way our mind works, we actually rely more on communicating back and forth between those two hemispheres, and that part of our brain is actually thicker and more complex than Eurasians, and that's what he told us in class. So and it was some other physiological differences. I like to say it's a difference between the African and the Asian, and that's what we're talking about here. So that's one of them. And even in regards to how sometimes you'll see like a Western Eurasian, they have some dance talent or singing talent or something, and it's rare. But at the same time, even with that, Dr. Africa was saying it's imitation. It's not, they process, movement and dance in a different way than the way that we do it. And I think it's more by, I have no idea. I definitely want to go into it more, because even in terms of energy centers, he's like, okay, they say we have 6 energy centers, but Africans have 12. So I mean, he goes deep into it. And I will check with Hunter Adams. I will check with some of my fellow students that studied under Dr. Africa with me. And I just I'm curious as to what you guys think about it, and I'll look into it a little bit more.
All right. I just to move forward, but I mean, we could stay on this a little bit longer. I would say thinking versus processing. I'm not too sure the difference, but if you're saying that whether Africans think differently from Eurasians, I would say definitely. I wouldn't necessarily say that Eurasians don't think, because I also, I would think that chimpanzees think, but I mean, it depends on if you think. It depends on whether or not we think that chimpanzees or dogs think. If we think chimpanzees and dogs don't think, but they only process, then maybe we can go into a physiological difference. But I would think that white people think, if dogs can think, I would think white people can think. But I'm not too sure if people think that dogs can think. Dang, somebody just went in the road. Candace is joining too. All right.
For me, I'm not too familiar with the processing versus thinking part, but the later part about the younger giants and the development of their psyche, I'm aware of the Iceman Sunman dichotomy. I don't remember very precisely how it's named, but it's something with ice and sun. So basically, because of this event, the last glaciation, they were trapped in the cold weather, and they developed a totally different culture, predatory culture, and also they became finally non-African.
I should add, because I'm familiar with Layla Africa's work, and I think it's pretty good. I would say that melanin is really important, and I think that's what he stresses, that melanin is really important. So, but another thing I also want to add is that being in the cold weather, even for us as Africans, when we're in the if you go to bed and it's cold, you're more likely to have a nightmare, and it just I can't imagine what kind of a society, because they're living in cold Europe, 24/7. I can't imagine what kind of society is frequently what kind of society will develop from people who are frequently harassed by nightmares. Because the paranoia from nightmares is kind of unreal. Like you will start distrusting your brother, your family, if they're every night you go to bed, you dream about them betraying or killing you or something. In some capacity. I think there's a lot going on. I wouldn't, but I come again. Oh, okay. So Kader was saying something, but he cut off. But all right, let's just go on to the remember Ani again, and hopefully we could tie in everything when the time comes. Because I did have the timer on. I didn't make it go off, but I did have it on, and it passed 10 minutes. So let's go to page 66 quickly, and we're going to start off with this one. It says, yet the idea... Okay, so if you're not talking, just mute yourself in case you're also talking to your environment. All right, so page 66 is, yet the idea of cause is problematic even with European logic. Of Aristotle's 4 kinds of causes, material, formal, efficient, and final, the final cause is crucial for our analysis. According to Aristotle, the final cause of an object, thing, or phenomenon is its purpose, the end for which it exists. In this view, determining the final cause of an object or phenomenon is the most important objective of science. At the same time, this tradition rigidly... Alright, let me just mute this brother for a second. Alright. In this view, determining the final cause of an object or phenomenon is the most important objective of science. At the same time, this tradition rigidly separates science and belief. Yet the idea of final cause can only be understood to be a belief. The belief is the idea of a final cause, gives to European thought its strong theological character. It leads to an assumption that everything that exists for a purpose, and that purpose is the most important thing about it. This idea manifests itself in ideologies as diverse as Judeo-Christian thought and Marxian analysis, and perhaps finds its ultimate expression in the idea of progress, a critical component of both of these traditions. European science, therefore, states what must be taken as an act of faith, the belief in cause, in an absolutist and deterministic manner. Clearly, the result is dogma, and its purpose is ideological scientism. Okay, I'll meet the brother. But, yeah, anybody have any thoughts on that passage that I just read? And again, it's on page 66. For those who have the book, it's the middle paragraph, or the first paragraph.
I totally agree, and we can even see it right now with this COVID crisis. Like they really think like, I don't know, because at the same time I feel they have like some cognitive dissonance going on, because they are starting to realize that not everything is fixated, so stuff move, everything is dynamic, so probably there's not such stuff like basically it seems as Einstein. Since Einstein said like everything is absolute, like the ground has been shaken. So here again, like I totally agree. Sorry? I totally agree with Annie here, Dr. Annie here, because like it's something, it's like a pivotal point in their culture, the finality of thought. Like there is only one truth. Like when they say something, when they discover something, it's definitive. And of course this has like ideological motivation and also political motivation behind it.
Okay. Yeah. Anyone else have anything to say about that? Well, I'll say this, that one of the things that really jumped at me was her discussing not just Judeo-Christian thought, but also Marxian analysis, which I think is really important for us, because if you look at...
Ich höre eine kurze Diskussion, ne?
Oh, Kader's
Deswegen...
Kader, you know we could hear you, right? Okay, I know he knows we can hear him. Alright, let me just mute him.
Oh, we speaking French now? What's up?
Juno Pova, I don't know, I can't do that.
Comment allez-vous?
Alright, anyway. Alright, so what was I saying? So, yeah, Marxian analysis. So the thing about Marxian analysis is that it really does say, you know, this is the end goal, this is the goal. Like the whole basis of Wazungu thought is to go towards this sort of like this sort of progress that you can't really reach, you know? This progress that's avoidable. Like if somebody says, hey, I don't like communism because of this country, the remark or the reply is, oh, well, that wasn't communism. We didn't reach communism yet. Communism is just the goal. in the same sense of, in Judeo-Christian thought, or even in Christian thought, sorry, you have, we're actually waiting for Jesus to return. Or even in, I guess, in Judaism, I think sorry, I guess that's Christianity. But you're waiting for revelations. You're waiting for this thing that's not going to happen.
No, in their thought also, they have the Messiah. The Messiah is the one to come and to save them. It's just not this one, but they are waiting for one Messiah too.
Oh, are they too? Oh, okay, yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Like it's this idea. It's this thing that keeps people looking forward at something that's not going to happen. And it's just ingrained inside of the culture to the point where, a lot of people like essentially you measure things according to this paradigm that, this is progress. Whereas, and then of course then you put other solutions, other environments behind whatever it is that your imagination is projecting. So it's like, this Messiah didn't arrive yet, so everything else is inferior, or the person before that is inferior, the other person, blah blah blah, right? Or Jesus didn't come, so blah blah blah, or we're not really a communist dictatorship across the planet, therefore, capitalism is bad and capitalism blah blah blah. But it really comes from this Wazungu mentality, and what it does as well is that it makes it so that because things are not this future that can't be reached, everything in the present is deplorable. So like for instance, you will have like Maurice Bishop. He's a great Pan-Africanist, if you will, right? Or a great African nationalist in Grenada, right? So Grenada is a tiny island, but they do have this revolution, so on and so forth. And you can imagine, like, you don't even have to know per se, but you can imagine that during the time of this conflict and his eventual, demise, that a lot of people were on the sideline, particularly those who were really westernized, and maybe were being critical of him, notwithstanding the fact that he's, fighting for his life, fighting for his people, so they might have, like it's already built into this whole Marxian analysis, this whole Wazungu paradigm, to essentially just be critical of anything that's not the end goal, but also understand that the only thing important is moving toward that end goal. So it's the same with like the capitalists, I want to say, has this mentality of industrialization, and of course there's a cost to it, the deterioration of the planet, the deterioration of the atmosphere, but that's not important, because if you look at a classic capitalist might be Elon Musk. He's like, if you hear how he articulates himself, he's like, we want to go on to another planet. We want to bring humans into the next stage of our development, which is interplanetary colonization, if you will. And that's really, it comes from the Wazungu mentality. Whereas, not to say that we're not for progress per se, but it's for us to understand that we can, like the harmony, the balance that we have in our culture, could still allow for interplanetary study, travel, interplanetary study, so on and so forth. But there's a balance to it. There's something more to it than this blind, narrow, this is progress, and everything short of progress, or everything behind us, or everything that's not this is bad. Kind of going back to the point about the revisiting, classical techniques 15 years later to say, that's actually why they were doing it.
Yeah, indeed, they fixate on the future. Not only they fixate on the future, but a future that they look towards to. It's a frightening future. So they frightens them a lot. So they try then to control what will happen in the future, try to control what will happen in the future by taking steps right now, so that what they fear that might happen in the future, at least might not happen. The future is frightening. They're always frightened.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have flashed in my mind right now about like the Iceman and Sun Child and Ice Child, something like this, where actually you can see that, yeah, two things. Like in their culture, you can see first that they hate nature. There is no such thing, and you can also see it with like the police brutality. Is that for them there is no such thing as a good human being. If you're a human being, you cannot be good. It stems from there. Like for me, it's a basic assumption for them. Like we, as Pan-Africanists and most African culture, I would say like we trust humans, right? And so we take you as you come. We don't judge you. We don't think that you're a bad person a priori. So, but they always think like, and you can also see it in the economy. Why we have like such drastic like economical theories is because like when you go back to the guy that theorized the economy, he's saying stuff to you like not Keynes, but the neoliberal one.
Adam
what's
Smith?
his name?
Are you talking about Adam Smith?
No. He was not neoliberal. Montpellier Society, if you know it.
Yeah.
The one who did like stuff with money.
Adam Smith.
Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett.
Almost.
Okay, we have 30 seconds to this 10 minutes. So.
Yeah. Sorry. So basically, this guy was telling you Hayek, if you know him.
Okay.
So he was studying that humans are bad, so therefore they must be controlled within an economic system, and this economic system must be designed as such that it will force you to get up in the morning and go to work, and that's why you have low wages. That's why you have like high prices for the flats and so on.
I know what you're talking about, bro.
It's whole thought is this, and then again we come back to this idea of progress. Why? Because you have a dichotomy. You have like the before that was bad and the future that will become better.
Mm-hmm.
And it's embedded in their culture, really.
Yeah.
Friedrich Hayek from Austria.
Of nature is bad, so we have to improve it, and so it will become more manageable and better. And this is progress for them.
All right. So I guess we exhausted that topic. I guess you were talking. Kata was telling us the name of the gentleman. So let's go to the next one, and then just so that we don't run over time too much, because I know everybody has a busy schedule. So we're gonna just jump into it on page 77. Let's see. I think this one. This one actually talks about what Cicely was discussing earlier. So this is really. I just don't know where I was going to start reading from. So I'm just going to try to read from Robert Sperry, and that'll be on page 77. It says, Roger Sperry of the California Institute of Technology has carried out investigations to further the understanding of the bimodal nature of our brains. His work has produced the following information. 1, that there is a connecting cable of nerve fibers between the two hemispheres of the brain. 2, that when this cable is severed, each hemisphere operates independently. And 3, that each hemisphere perceives its own reality, but that this reality is only partial or incomplete without that of the other hemisphere. The intact brain has a corpus callosa connecting body that facilitates communication between the two hemispheres and so unifies the thinking, feeling being. The principles expressed are those of an African cosmology in which we have the fundamental twinness of the universe, the complementary functions of opposites that cooperate to form the proper working of the whole. But our notion of what constitutes intelligence has been molded by the minority Western European worldview, and so we have difficulty thinking holistically in this regard, since the European world is predicated on first separation, dichotomization, and then dominance of one of the opposites. The two hemispheres are now known as left and right. The left hemisphere is thought to function in a verbal analytic mode, while the right hemisphere is nonverbal, global, or synthetic, spatial, complex, and intuitive. Clearly, just as the latter was previously known as the minor function, it is consistently and systematically, even one could say institutionally, been devalued in European culture, civilization culture. It is rarely even recognized as being a source of intelligence. It is neither tested for nor encouraged. Intelligence in European society has been identified with the cognitive mode that is generated and controlled by the left hemisphere of the brain. Hunter Adams prefers to talk about cultural styles of knowing rather than splitting the brain in this way. I do want to say, I know somebody wants to say something. I just want to just point out that for some reason this is not the quote I wanted to read, but I guess the ancestors wanted me to read this so that Cicely could speak. So if anything, Cicely, you want to say something?
Yeah, funny enough.
Okay, maybe not.
Yeah, I'm looking for more scholarship in this area, and I will find it and share that with you guys as well. So that's really what all I have is more questions.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I do want to point out that she does have. I'll say what Dr. Ben would say, which was that, like the bibliography, already familiar with Hunter Adams, so you probably already have it.
Yeah.
So, but obviously, but what Dr. Ben would say is just read the bibliography and then read that bibliography for whatever books you read from there, and so on and so forth.
I'm gonna reach out to Hunter Adams myself, because why not?
Right? Why not? Oh, okay. So
yeah.
I see what page I was actually supposed to read page 73, but if anybody wants to comment on 77 quickly, let me know. I think Machiavelli was saying something while I was reading. No? Okay, so anybody have any comments about what was just read? So about the two sides of the brains, I think that's something that, like it could be that they're just processing information. But I feel like outside shit, like, I don't mean to curse, but like, damn, if y'all can't.
Another thing that Dr. Africa was very careful about this too. He never really considered himself a melanin scientist. Just to add to that, another text, if you ever read The World in Africa by Du Bois, this is just something general that he does in that book, which he's like, whose idea was this, basically? You know what I mean? Like, instead of, subjugating and committing genocide, they could have, and he gives like all these very simple but clear alternatives to, Western Eurasian, basically genocide. Like if they really wanted power, then they could have done it this way, and then it wouldn't have been as harmful or harmful at all to other people. Meaning, there's a lot of ways to get to the end result of what they claim they were going for. Why did they choose this? So he's also asking the question that Dr. Ani is answering, but he's also showing us that look at all these different, imaginative alternatives that's just been skipped over. And sometimes I think that we, again, focus on what we have as opposed to how we're using it. And one of the things that we're trying to do with reading this text is to free our imagination from this Euro-hegemonic hold that it has on our imagination. Now we're arguing versus capitalism versus socialism, capitalism versus communism, and nobody's asking the questions, why the hell haven't we come up with a better system? Or why do we insist on people on this idea that somehow current humanity is better than and more progressive than past civilizations or past versions of humanity, when we don't really have real evidence to show that.
Exactly.
So it's clear that our minds are and our imaginations are just limited by by this Euro Asili, and I think that is a primary emphasis, not just in this particular passage, but just in this book in general. So anyway,
and both the communism we talk about and capitalism come from the same Asili, European Asili. So it's one and the same thing. It's their thought process. Communism, capitalism, one and the same thing.
They're both struggles for control and domination of the planet. Dictatorship of the proletariat. What does that mean? A dictatorship of the proletariat. It's who's going to be in control. The question for the Wazungu is who's going to be in control. And you notice the dualism, the dichotomy, the separation. It's the proletariat against the bourgeoisie. The workers against the capitalists, if you will. And the workers now control the society when the capitalists were controlling them. Everything is from this control. Everything is from this paradigm. So it's really fascinating. And I want to say, just to add that, this is a clear typo on my part. If you look at my record, I said page 73, page 73, page 73, and then it's 77. Why? There's more at play, but anyway, regardless, I do want to go into page 73. So we're gonna go to page 73 very quickly and try not to dilly dally, I guess. So this is pretty interesting. So on page 73, you have Lewis Richards says, according to the philosophy of the Sophists, there does not exist any objective truth, only beliefs. Man is the measure of all things, said Protagoras. There might be many contradictory opinions, but the one and the same thing, and all of them equally true. The wise man is he who can change the opinions of the many through the art of persuasion. This explains how they believe that they could prove the wrong logic as the right one, and the right as the wrong one. We would do well to look more closely at the writings of the Sophists from an African-centered perspective. Oh, this is Mirmani. So she says, we would do well to look more closely at the writings of the Sophists from an African-centered perspective. It would seem that they were dangerous because if one believed them, the painstaking arguments in the Platonic dialogues might not hold water. Things are not necessarily what they are made to appear. In contemporary Euro-American society, the skill that pays off is that which enables one to make aggression look like defense, oppression look like freedom, and cultural imperialism look like enlightenment. The Sophists, we are told, were dangerous because they undermined the concept of religion, family, the state, and moral behavior. But isn't this what Plato had to do? They taught that religion was an invention of the philosophers, that gods were the creations of man, and that the laws were passed by the strong for their own protection. The danger of such teachings to society was vast. The young people especially were apt to become influenced and ruined. So I like that passage. Anybody have any comments on that passage?
I'd say do what I say, but don't say what I do. So.
Don't say what I do. Okay.
So basically, you can see everything like US is waging war all over the place and saying it's mercy. So she's on point once again.
Yeah, she's on point all the time. Like that. Like she the phrase I guess is she don't miss, right? But anyway, I like this one because of this idea that we tend to degrade, or because of this Platonic legacy. If you say somebody's a sophist or they're practicing sophistry, you're basically saying that they're speaking nonsense. So it's just a way to say that, just to dismiss somebody's thoughts. But here, remember, Ani is saying we actually might want to explore what the sophists were saying, And I thought, and actually that was one of the things that really originally, like when I was looking at this book, I was saying to myself, if Plato was a student in Africa, right, then why is Plato so negative? But then as Mirma Ani breaks it down, it's possible too that these sophists were students in Africa as well. And so what she's kind of getting at too is that Plato kind of misrepresents the African philosophy in some regards, And in those regards, you know, he's talking to this Asili that Wazungu has, and in so doing, it's his voice that's elevated. So, whereas the sophists, you know, if you look at what they're saying about, you know, well, you know, there could be multiple truths. You know, there could be, like, opinions can be, you know, there's multiple truths. And if you look at it also in the sense of, you know, how they break down how laws were passed by the strong for their own protection. You know, this is actually very poignant and critical for us to understand. But separately, as we go through, you know, this like how Wazungu used his rhetoric to kind of confuse us. You know, we don't see, you know. So, like, for instance, one of the things that I write in my book is, you know, that realistically speaking, like a lot of these nations are there to, you know, facilitate the upper class in a sense, you know. And so you'll see a lot of us tend to criticize, you know, society and say, oh, well, you're not doing enough for the lower class, you're not doing enough for the middle class, or you're mostly doing the middle class, you're not doing for the lower class, blah, blah, and look how the rich get richer and the poor don't get richer, or the poor get poorer, or whatever. And you realize that this, or you say, oh, the wealth gap is increasing and the government should do something about it. But you realize, you know, particularly from what the sophist says, or what I would say, is that, yes, the wealth gap increases because that's the point of the national structure. And so you see the sophists were saying the same thing, you know. So it's pretty interesting that, you know, we're kind of, because that's the thing that I noticed, that we're kind of groomed to complain about this wealth gap and say this is not an intended consequence, as if it weren't an intended consequence, when in fact it's the whole point, you know. Or even if we look at the corruption in, you know, or what we call corruption in African countries, it's the point, you know.
Yeah, exactly. But I like myself to go back to definitions. Capitalism is the whole point of the capitalist system is to make profit, and to make profit you have to have somebody who profits half of somebody. So basically you have a profiter and a profitee. So that's in the definition. You can just like unpack the structure of the system basically.
Yeah, and the thing is that
you're right.
Sorry, Kato, you were saying something?
He's definitely right. It's like the exploitation of man from man, and that's the whole aim of it. That's the whole point of it.
The camera is on.
Yeah, Cicely's camera's on. I think she put it on purpose, but I don't know. What was I saying? That you yeah, I mean, but that's the thing too. It's like what Miramani's doing though is she's kind of showing you that, you know, we don't have to attach it to capitalism. This idea of exploiting other people, this idea of dominating other people, this idea of controlling other people. And actually, I do want to touch on to that, you know, because Cicely was mentioning Du Bois's work and how Du Bois is like, hey, there's alternatives, but how else? But you know, there's alternatives to massive violence and this and slaughter and all that kind of stuff. But is there like of course, if you go by the rhetoric that they're saying, you know, if you're trying to do some noble thing, you're trying to do enlightenment and blah blah blah, then clearly, you know, actually, I guess she says it. Aggression looks like defense. Like if you're trying to defend yourself, then being aggressive doesn't make sense. You know, if you're trying for freedom, oppression doesn't make sense, right? If you're trying to enlighten people, cultural imperialism doesn't make sense. But the reality is that they're trying to control people, you know. And when you're trying to control people, aggression, oppression, and cultural imperialism makes perfect sense. You know, like one of the things that there's two things. One is that when you go to Africa, you realize that a lot of the best land, like Wazungu took a lot of the best land so that African people would have to work in the mines. Because if African people had the best land, right, and you told them, hey, you know, if you go to the mines, you could afford a chicken leg, they'd say, look, I have a whole farm. I don't need to get a chicken leg. You know, I don't need to go risk my life in a mine if I have a whole farm. But if you take them off of the farm, right, then, or if you take the land away from them, if you force them off the land, then suddenly, yes, you know, in order to survive, you need that chicken wing. So you're going down to the mine. And it's the same thing that they did to these Amerindians here in America is that they slaughtered the buffalo. They poisoned the water. Where you like if you're in a regular city, you can't fish in the water. And if you do fish, not only will you get fined for fishing sometimes, but if you do fish, a lot of the fish are like they're toxic. But this is as they say, by design. This is on purpose because if you're going to control the people, if you're going to demand a person goes into the factory, right, into the mines, into wherever, right, they can't get fish for free. They can't eat for free.
You have to have leverage.
Exactly, bro. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Okay.
I just said
That's what they're doing right now.
you have to have leverage on the people.
Yeah, you have to have
them
leverage.
to do what you want.
Leverage for their survival. That's the most important thing. And actually I was having a conversation about that, but I don't know if it's too related. But like a lot of the commodification, objectification of people, so on and so forth, relates to this economic order and this control that they brought in. But I don't know if that's too related, so we'll just go on. Anybody else have any comments? Because we still have a few minutes on this question. But if not, we can always just pass it over. All right, so we're gonna go to the next one.
Excuse me, before we move forward, I wish we could put a mental bookmark by this point too, because instead of looking for capitalist origins of oppression, and racist systems and all of that, Dr. Ani has put kind of like she's thrown a monkey wrench in that conversation. And I don't think it's one that Pan-Africanists have actually had enough of. So it's not so much that I want to make a point, besides the fact that we really need to talk about specifically how the systems that we currently see are origins of a particular cultural assembly versus what Eric Williams would call capitalism and slavery. So, yeah, that's it.
It's easily dismissible, like I was saying, because you can see it's in them, you were talking about the fishing part, right? About you can get fined if you're caught fishing. Mm-hmm. So just imagine in South America, in French Guyana, basically what happens is that before we used to fish, to farm, I forget the English word for to go hunting, and then you'll have a role. You have teams of policemen. They are rotating from France to French Guyana often, and when the new ones come on, they will go to the forest and then they will just kill the birds, all of them, just for fun, because that's how they are. So when you notice such things, immediately in your mind you're saying those people are very crazy. Why would you kill a bunch of animals like this and just leave them dead on the floor, or just for fun? And so yes, it's very clear that we shouldn't approach the problem with capitalism or whatever, but at least on the psychological level.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually, from my literature, I would say Eurasianism, or I would even go to, I think it's I.E. Arma, but he would say our way for what we do and their way for their way. Actually, tomorrow, like I said, Machiavelli's going to do this spirituality conversation, but, one of the things that Arma would talk about is, our way. And he relates that to reciprocity, so on and so forth. So what I would do for my literature is I would talk about their way and say that it's basically their Asili versus our Asili, and their Asili is more about exploitation. So it doesn't matter what system they're in, it's going to be exploitative, because even if you look at before capitalism, you have feudalism. Before feudalism, you have slavery. These systems are based off of exploitation, and they're based off of the exploitation of even just whites with whites. There's this famous quote and I do want to move on, but there's this famous quote about this upper class white person who said that, you know, the ideals of society is for the rich to be on one side and the poor to be on another, you know, and that's like the ideal society. And he's talking about white people. He's talking about whites in Europe. He's nothing to do with black people, nothing to do with whatever. It's just about like their mentality. They're mentally suited for class division or division and so on and so forth. And we just have to accept that that's their way, and leave them to it. But as Cicely is saying, you know, when we formulate our own ideas, you know, we just go back off of our own systems, which would be reciprocity. And just to relate, I don't want to talk too much. I don't want to talk too much. But you know, when we were discussing the when he was discussing the hunting thing, you know, the reality is that every animal on the planet like that does hunt doesn't hunt out, you know, other things to extinction, but instead hunts in a balanced kind of way. And so their population is balanced against their prey, right? And that's how we would do it as well, you know, so we could sustain ourselves hunting for thousands of years, right? But Wazungu, what noting that you could sustain yourself independently of them, you know, would go and slaughter all of the animals so that you can't. So, you know, they create this dependency. So it's, you know, as Du Bois might query, why would you do this? But the reason why you do this is because, you know. Now here's the thing I want to say. Unfortunately, this other passage is kind of long. It's really good, page 90, but it's because it's page 98 to page 101, so I probably won't read it, you know. I'm going to go to 104. If you guys want me to go back to 98, then I can, but I'll just go to 104, and if that's enough, then that's enough, all right? So on page 104, she goes, with Plato, epistemology became ideological. What is more, contrary to what some have claimed, Platonic conceptions did not make knowledge accessible to the masses through desacralization. What he did was to ensure that, at least until the Gutenberg galaxy, the few would have no threat from the many, because the many did not have access to the intellectual life of the state. This was due to the ascendancy of the literate mode, coupled with the lack of printing and mass production technology, as well as the fact that only the privileged few were trained to be literate in this sense. Plato's plan was foolproof, because even when the European masses gained access centuries later, the mechanisms of control were so tightly structured that the assumptions they had to assimilate in order to be considered educated guaranteed that they would think the way he had planned. It was as though his hand reached through centuries of cultural existence, as the European cognitive style, Urumawazo, became an extension of Platonism. Not only all European intellectuals, but all intellectuals would be trained in the academy, Plato's legacy, a testament to the success of European cultural imperialism. The academy has preserved a cultural tradition, a race of people, and a dominant society. No matter the internecine controversies and so-called political revolutions that might occur, the academy ensures that the ideological infrastructure will remain intact. Maybe I'll read the next paragraph too, alright? So the emergent theme is power. What begins to develop from this initial discussion is a portrait of the European Urumawazo as responding to an asili that is power-seeking. A particular definition of power presents itself in the search for European predilection, temperament, and need. Power is here defined not as the power to do, which results from the giving and receiving of energy from forces in the universe and through interaction with these forces as they manifest themselves in the various modalities of natural being. It is instead defined as power over, and is predicated on, or rather originates in, separation. This is the fanatical European objection. Power to do seeks balance and harmony. Power over functions only through the modality of control. It precludes cosmic, communal, or sympathetic relationships. It is essentially political and materialistic. Alright. Anybody have anything to say about that one? Let me put on the timer. Any comments? By the way, you guys don't have to wait for anybody to speak up. You could just speak up.
Well, for me, it goes back to their deceitful character. Like, they say one thing and they do the contrary. So basically, it's I don't know. Like, it's a complete book. The book, the idea, the framework she lays out is very complete. So it follows from start to end.
Yeah. Anybody else?
For me, is that they have this Hospian idea that man is so brutish that we all are brutish, meaning that we are all are very bad, because they think it's like always for like retribution, and that's why they always try to justify this with retribution. We're doing this because
Also, we can add also that
Wait, you can't hear him?
she.
Wait, hold on. You couldn't hear him?
You couldn't hear?
Okay. Wait, what? All right. Yeah, Kid, continue.
Yeah, I could hear. No, I was just saying is that they think that they have to be that violent and that brutish, meaning have to be always in violence, because they think if they don't have the upper hand, if they don't command and control, then somebody else is going to do it. That's the entire ideology, and the thing is, yes, they have their way of system, and we have our own way of system, but their way of system is also intruding on our lives because of the exploitation. Yeah, because they're not only exploiting in the European countries, they're also especially exploiting the South. And it would be, I think it would be very difficult to just leave them alone, and we could do our own thing and they could do their own thing. I really think this would be a terrible mistake to let them do their own.
Oh, yeah, sure. So one thing I really wanted to emphasize too was that she said not only all European intellectuals, but all intellectuals would be trained in the academy. And I think it's really important, because one thing that Cicely, you're having a conversation that we can hear. But the thing I wanted to say was that one of the things that I emphasize too is that the academy is really, really important for solidifying power, and that's something that she stresses in this these two paragraphs. The idea that it's realistically speaking, when you train human beings to fulfill functions that are probably necessary for the survival of the state or whatever, but whatever it is that you may train them to do, when you train them to do that, they then you have an opportunity to expose them to a level of thinking that can then guarantee that sort of thought process continues throughout the whole community. So
just another cog in the machine.
Exactly. So it's like, you may train somebody to be a doctor, but you're also training them about the European way of thinking. So whereas they may learn the medicine, they're also learning to dichotomize and put some things as superior to the other. Superior versus inferior, and that sort of thinking then can translate to their political work. That sort of training could translate to their economical work, their cultural work, where they donate to, what they do. All of this kind of it's subtle training. It's subtle. It's a subtle way to control.
Them on code.
Exactly, to get them on code. Whereas, but you don't see it, because all you see, and they won't notice it, because what they're going to school, they're learning chemistry. They're sitting through biochemistry. They're sitting through this, so on and so forth. Or if they're trying to do computer programming, they're learning about JavaScript. What they see is that, but then they're also taking these other courses. They're having these other conversations. They're deep inside of what we call the epistemology. They're deep inside of this European epistemology, and in so being, everything like the power comes through. So why I say this is because one of the things that I would advocate for is us creating our own academies, our own academic structures, but to the extent then that we would include we would include our own epistemology, so that even though you're studying this biochemistry, you're studying JavaScript or whatever you're studying, you also have this view of harmony, this view of balance, this view of letting nature thrive, or understanding the importance of nature as opposed to dominating over nature or controlling nature, or dominating other people and controlling other people. The difference between, as she would put it, power to do and power over. All of that is going to be all of that is something to consider. And I mean, we technically hear that in the like if you talk about the medical field, we technically hear about people saying, oh, like some doctors may say, oh, let's go about a holistic way of healing you, and a lot of the scholars that we esteem, like Layla Africa, like was mentioned earlier, are about that kind of holistic health and that holistic living, and that's something that we can nurture more, particularly if we can build the institutions, and in building those institutions be mindful of whether or not we're propagating this European epistemology and this idea of, well, look, you learn medicine in order to control the body or control this and do that, so on and so forth, as opposed to other methods that could be engaged. Anybody else have any comments on that one?
Yeah, it would lead us to some kind of debate, I think, because I see what you mean. Basically, it ties a little bit with the work of Claude Anderson, and for my practice, I would say that when you take, for instance, like computer programming, I see what he means. Like, for instance, like when people design some programs, some programmers tend to be very, very controlling. They are building interfaces and programs that are very, like, they act like policemen. Like, you cannot deviate from what the guy is saying you to do. Like, if he tells, like, you should click 1, 2, 3, even if the order doesn't matter, you should click it. And I hate to see such stuff. So I don't design like this, but at the same time, we have to acknowledge that the program itself is running on some kind of European creation at the end of the day. It's still a machine that you control, and the program is the controller, actually. So I don't know how far we can stretch this concept of, like, trying to change the system from inside, basically, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I only mentioned. Well, the reason why I deviated from programming was because I didn't want the brother. Well, somebody here is a medical student. I don't want him to think I was just talking about him. You know what I mean? but yeah, no. I mean, look, when I say that there's more at play, I mean that even outside of your professional work, the epistemology, what you learn in school, the world view that you learn sticks with you even outside of your profession. So regardless of whether or not you're programming or you're doing medicine or you're doing whatever, the reality is that now you're politically like your political mindset.
I was just responding on the fact that we have to build our own institution to infuse in the minds of the student, like, our way of thinking.
Of course.
But if we do only that without having, I don't know, like the whole structure, basically, like the whole community thinking like this, it may fail, because, like, we will just probably think as we think, but still being inside the system won't give us the latitude to act. Yeah. Basically.
No, I feel you. I mean that's an important point. That's an important point. When I said Java and all that kind of stuff, I was just yeah. But I mean, I understand what you mean, that you do not want to continue in their economic order. But it's really important to also realize that like it has to be both. I think that's really the stress here, that you can't just okay, well, we're gonna have our own thing over here, but then you still think in this domination paradigm, right? But then as well, like you said, it doesn't matter if you're in a harmonious paradigm if you're still being dominated. You have to like, liberation is complex and complicated. It's not just one solution per se, and I guess that goes back to the sophist remark. But anybody else have any comments? I guess you heard my thing. It's up to you guys whether you think I should read this other passage. It's kind of long, or if you think we should just close it out right here, or just have free discussion right now. What do you guys think?
Sir. I want to go for the reading. I don't know for the others.
Okay, so let me get another
Myself,
vote.
The reading would be good.
Okay, all right. So I'm just gonna try to. I want to like skip through it. But this one's like really one of those pages. I think I post them all up on the Discord. But it's pages 98 to 101, and it's just like everything, fire, 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 right? So she starts off with, this is not a place to discuss the depth and worldviews of majority civilizations. It is appropriate, however, to make some obvious observation about what African, Amerindian, and Oceanic majority thought systems have in common to the exclusion of European thought. All of the views mentioned are spiritual in nature, that is, they have spiritual bases and thereby reject rationalism and objectification as valued epistemological modes. Obviously, they do have rationalistic and pragmatic aspects, but these do not dominate. These views generate an authentic cosmology, the interrelatedness of all beings. They reject Aristotelian logic as the primary path to ultimate truth, while recognizing the symbolic and not the literal mode as appropriate for the expression of meaning. Most certainly, these people share a vision of a harmonious order achieved through balance as they seek to understand and maintain that order. We who have been educated in European societies have grown up assuming that it is only with the triumph over such worldviews that true knowledge begins. Yet what should strike us as students of culture is the fact that of all the world's civilizations, the European Utamawazo worldview is the strangest, the minority view. It is most conspicuous in its materialism and rationalism. Max Weber called this universalism. By what logic does anomaly become the norm? Obviously, with the introduction of ideology and value judgment, Weber mistook overwhelmingly successful cultural aggression for universalism. The European worldview is far superior to the others mentioned in its ability to generate material accumulation, technological efficiency, and imperial might. That does not make it universal. Fortunately, these are not the goals of all of humankind, nor the definition of all cultural asilies and other views of reality have led many to construct different models, to envision the possibility of new and different functional definitions. We have already seen that African-centered theory is moving towards new definitions of science. In The Sacred Science, de Lubitz offers an interpretation of ancient African philosophy. He calls it pharaonic theology. It is a sacred science because it concerned with revealed knowledge and with the beginning of things. It is founded on an irrational basis and therefore not a rational science. It rests on the assumption of a common energetic origin to all bodies, an ultimate spiritual source which alone is able to animate matter, an undefined cosmic energy. De Lubitz recognizes two irreconcilable mentalities based on the separation of two concepts, one that points to a kinetic energy immanent in matter, and the other that calls upon an undefined cosmic energy. With absurd reasoning, our science sees in the universe nothing but a closed circuit, an agglomerate, and a decomposition of the self-same matter. Such a view is certainly less reasonable than admission of an undefined source of energy which becomes matter, although the latter solution poses a purely metaphysical problem. From there, it is but a very small step to seeing a divine principle in the harmony of the world. The interpretation of both de Lubitz and Janes as antithetical, one understands that the ancient Kemites to have had a heightened consciousness, the other says that they had no consciousness. That is because of differences in perspective. In de Lubitz's view, the materialist mentality splits from the spiritualist beginning with Xenophanes in the Eleatic school of philosophy circa 530 before the Common Era. With the split comes the beginning of the separation between science and religious thought and ritual. These are dichotomized in European thought so that rationalistic religion in Aquinas, Leibniz, et al. Approaches the absurd as great minds wrestle with the search for scientific and materialist proofs of the existence of the most spiritual of beings. Even now, Christian thought suffers from a doctrine that overlooks the contradiction inherent in a faith based on secular historicity. European science ascended on the demise of spiritual religion. In the early schools of what was to be considered Greek philosophy, the teachings of pharaonic science are evident, and what continued to be developed as science was heavily influenced by what had preceded in Kemet, ancient Egypt. What began to change, however, was the approach and attitude of objectification. The new forms had a different Utamaroho spirit life. The definition of the Utamawazo became critical. The Greeks, unable to grasp the spiritual principles at the base of the sacred sciences, simplistically anthropomorphized the cosmic truths. Their religious response resulted in the reduction of African philosophy as expressed through the symbols of the netters, through the attribution of physical characteristics to metaphysical principles. According to Delubitz, those who rejected this adulterated version of ancient mysteries sought truth through an extreme rationalization. Two tendencies developed in archaic Europe. One group claimed the body of religious rituals whose base they could not understand. The other group took the pragmatic scientific aspects and developed them into a science without meaning. This is the chronic European split between faith and reason, which was to intensify throughout the centuries of European development. Rational doctrines led to the denial of the divine, the sacred, yet rationality alone could never reflect cosmic truth, and ironically could not give spiritual nor ultimate intellectual satisfaction. This has been understood in Kemet and is still understood outside of the European tradition. As Delubitz argues, there must always be mystery involved in the rationality of the origin, which makes rational philosophical construction impossible. A little more. It is almost as though people outside of the European tradition, the majority, make up a collectivity who recognize and are comfortable with a tiny bit of mystery at the beginning and the end. This view originates with human beginnings in Africa. Ai Kwe Armar writes in 2000 Seasons, "We have not found that lying trick to our taste, the trick of making up some knowledge of things possible to think of, things possible to wonder about, but impossible to know in any such ultimate way." There are several theories whose work touches on the striking difference between European worldview and that of the majority. Several who do not presume this to be an indication of the superiority of Western civilization, that is, who do not approach the comparison Eurocentrically. Often such theorists will contrast Eastern philosophies with those of Europe. Friedrich Capra, in the Tao of Physics, attempts to reconcile Western science and Eastern mysticism. In the process, he characterizes these two views of reality, just as Dixon had done with the African and Euro-American views. In Capra's discussion, the Eastern view comes out on top. The Eastern and early Greek view is organic. All things are perceived as being interrelated in different manifestations of the same ultimate reality. The basic unity of the universe is the key to understanding phenomena, and one's aim becomes that of transcending the notion of the isolated self and to identify oneself with the ultimate reality. Spirit and matter are joined. Causal forces are intrinsic properties of matter. One is struck again and again with the familiar sound of this characterization. It is almost identical to our description of the African worldview. How many of us have been compelled to ask why the European worldview is the only one that differs so drastically from those of majority cultures? The European solves this problem by inventing the concept of modernity based on progress. The following is Capra's characterization of Western philosophy, in contrast to the unifying philosophy of the Milesians, the ancient Indian and Chinese civilizations. He says, "The split of this unity began with the Eleatic school, which assumed the divine principle standing above all gods and men. This principle was first identified with the unity of the universe, but was later seen as an intelligent and personal God who stands above the world and directs it. Thus began a trend of thought which led ultimately to the separation of spirit and matter, and to a dualism which became characteristic of Western philosophy." Okay. Woo! All right, yeah. So anyway, woo. All right.
Congrats.
Yeah, I know. I was woo. All right. Anyway, so yeah. Anybody have anything to say about that one? Y'all didn't make me read that for no reason, right?
Yeah, that whole passage was very serious, man.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is what she just basically gets to the whole purpose of the book, and you know, it just is the fundamental understanding of what
For me, I would say like
is meant to be.
the fact that she highlights the separation they make between no, I will go that way. Let me cut up my thoughts.
Okay, you collected them?
It was quite long. She says something at some point like they accept irrationality at the beginning and at the end, if I remember correctly. So basically it reminds me like some mathematical problems, and We call that how do you call this? Something with limits. So basically, sometimes you have like nice stuff in mathematics, and then at the very end of each function, you have like a mess, like 0 divided by 0, something totally irrational.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, you go there, and then you try to bend the reality by saying, by inventing some theory to reconciliate the difference you have between your model and the reality. So I would say that we see that a lot in the European culture, because look at the beginning of the universe, right? They cannot tell you what happens, and we have like diverging theories. You have like the multiverse theory, like say, we are not living in one universe, but at the same time we have multiple universe, and then you have like the string theories or infinite universe theories saying that actually our universe right now will then collapse again and then form another universe, and it destroys everything, every bit of their logic, and yet they won't track back to say, maybe we made a mistake or something, and we should go about it some other way.
Yeah. No, you're right. A lot of things they don't understand. Like I used to do that astrophysics myself, and it's like, dark energy, dark matter. These are substances, or these are supposed substances that, if the math is correct, then like in order for the math to work, there has to be something else out there that cannot be seen, apparently. So like, for instance, if you measure all the mass in the galaxy, right, or in the solar system, or whatever, the galaxy or whatever, you say to yourself, this cannot hold. They would all fly apart. So there has to be dark matter, something that we don't see. Or when it comes to dark energy, it's like, okay, if we measure all the energy in the universe, we would think that it would start collapsing or something. But instead, it's it's acceleratingly, expanding. So it's like, okay, there must be some energy that we just can't measure, can't see. And so it's
quantum theory. Einstein even coined the phrase "spooky action at a distance." Like
exactly.
because in the model we have of physics right now, we say nothing can travel faster than light, and we did like experiments lately to prove that. Now we know that information travels faster than light. So, and also it reminds me that we also have something else we don't discuss much in the general public, is that we have a crisis of reproduction, replication in science. Basically, I'm not even speaking about like psychology, because 70% of the studies in psychology are just going to the trash bin, because basically they cannot reproduce them. So you have a lot of paper, a lot of quote unquote scientific paper in psychology, but they are not valid because nobody can reproduce what they say inside this paper. So it's very funny to look at the same time they want this definitive truth. They want also something that you can explain only with objects, and they don't manage, but still they go with the ideology. So
So I wanna just say why one of the things that, like, the reason why this was like fire was like the reason why I just didn't read page 98 and I had to end on 101 was because I like this quote at the end of 101 where this other individual was describing how there was a school of thought that had I guess God.
Eleatics. I've noted that you have some information about it, because it's the first time I guess I come across this term.
The Eleatic school. Well, it sounds like it's just a Greek. It's like the Greeks, like the Sophists or the Pythagoreans. Basically some people were following maybe this guy named Elia, but the reason why I found it interesting was because today one of the things like there's this group of individuals called atheists, I guess, right? And what the atheists like a lot of times you see is atheists saying, "Oh, I don't believe in God," right? And that's fine. I'm not arguing with them. What I'm saying is that just like when I heard that kind of statement, when I was young, I was like, when you say that, I don't believe in God, it's like you automatically sound like you do, because essentially you're saying, oh, this entity that's separate from us, I don't believe exists, right? But it's encoded in your language to basically communicate on the level of the people who do believe, whereas the very question itself is just it looks like, going back, as I said about the Eleatic school, it goes back to even ancient Greece, maybe before that, but at least in ancient Greece, you see that this same, well, God is this entity that's separate from us, and it's a guy somewhere, distant, directing everything.
In the cloud.
It's something that they made up. They made it up, and then now 2,000 years later, you have people who are trying to, go against the church, if you will, and they're saying, oh yeah, no, I don't believe in your thing, but it was something that somebody made up 2,000 years, like so many years ago, and it's not even addressed or contextualized in that sense, but more in the sense of, oh well, if God were real, then no, you don't even have to go there. It's like it was fabricated, but now you have people who will say, who try to sound deep, and they're like, oh, I believe that God is all of us, or in all of us, or blah blah blah, or God's a woman, or blah blah blah, like all sorts of alternatives to this idea that was essentially just a fabrication of a certain philosophical school. So it's really important too, I would say, that we can like how important philosophy is in that sense. But anyway, anyone else have any comments on that?
I would just add about the term God. We use God, but actually God is their creation, so it's confined to what they to how they defined it. Mm-hmm. And I would use like some the term like nature,
exactly,
like the ancient the Egyptian term for equivalent. It's not even an equivalent of God, basically. Yeah. And it's by starting to use our terms again, mm-hmm. To describe our reality.
Exactly.
That's the way forward.
I do want to just add on to this in the sense of, there's this scholar who was doing this presentation on Abibi Tumi, and I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I think it's like Montgomery something, but he was saying that the thing with God. No, he said that God is just an invention by white people to make white people divine, and that kind of stuck with me, in the sense that realistically speaking, if you're a people, if you're any sort of people, right, and you're living your life and you have your own natural rule, you have your own abosom, you have your own what was it called? Orisha. You have your own belief system, right? And then somebody else comes along, and then they say, and then they have their own belief system. That's all perfectly fine. But the thing is that in your belief system, you like they represent you. They represent your divinity. They represent your like they represent your ethical framework, your mentality, your beliefs. And then now another people come up and they say, oh no, this is the real God. And if you look at their faces, and if you look at what their God looks like, it always looks like them, or it speaks their language, like, so for Islam, you might not know what Muhammad looks like or Allah looks like, but he speaks Arabic, so you kind of know what he looks like, you know what I mean? He speaks, you know what I mean? So and the same with, so a lot of it is kind of like you have these other people who are not necessarily divine, not necessarily spiritual, and particularly in the ancient world, you knew they weren't. But then what will come about is that they come and they say, oh no, look, this is Jesus. Jesus is somebody who died for your sin, blah blah blah. And then they show you a picture of Jesus, and he's this white guy, and you're a black guy. So like the whole purpose of it kind of is to make them divine, because without that, if you were to judge them, if you were to judge white folk based off of like a Yoruba standpoint, or a Khan standpoint, they wouldn't be divine. You know, there's no reason to they wouldn't be spiritual. They wouldn't be enlightened if you judge them from your own African standpoint.
They are Yurugu. They lack this component.
Exactly. But now they come about and they present themselves as enlightened, as divine, as enlightened, and that's really, I would say, that's the main point of religion in that sense, you know, or one of the central points of religion. But anyway, that's actually the whole conversation. If anybody wants to add anything or even let us know how we can contact you, now would be the time. Otherwise, I can cut off the recording and you know, tell everybody to have a good day, you know. Oh, Tico checked in and said, peace to the panelists. Anybody have any comments? Anybody have any last comments? Or were you guys wanting to do chapter 2 or not really? Because I think chapter 1 was good. I mean, I don't know if... I think I'm going to take my sweet time in chapter 2.
I wanna still finish the whole book, if possible.
Oh, you want us to do another...
Yeah, why not? Why would we not
Why not? Necessarily.
Yeah, why not? We could definitely do chapter 2.
In 2 weeks.
The book is very challenging, and I think it's best done in a group. But
okay.
that's my, you know, opinion. Right. So I'm willing to go through the whole
No, that's good. That's good. It should really be done that way with the book, because if I haven't started the book, and if I read it alone, I don't think I will comprehend everything that's trying to say.
Right, and I feel the same way about it.
Yeah, definitely.
All I have after the first chapter is more questions.
Sure. Well, look, you just bring them. You bring them in a thing. And if you guys like this format, we can keep doing this format. If you want to do a different format, just let me know, and I can accommodate it. But sure, if you guys want to, it means I gotta actually get to it, because I was reading chapter 2 and I was like, woo. You know, you know what I mean? You know, no, I mean, I liked it though. I'm gonna use it tomorrow. But otherwise, I'm gonna thank everybody for joining me.
Thank you.
One of the brothers had to cut out early, but you know.
Thank you, brother. Thank you. That was good.
All right, so thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks for inviting us.
All right, and next time,
thank you.
I'm gonna try to read chapter 2. I'm gonna try to read chapter 2, and I'll let you guys know. I'll give you guys some time as well, and then hopefully we can go forward. But all right, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Shemi Hotep.
Thank you. All right. Have a nice day.
Likewise. Bye.